Hi, everybody. Welcome to Parsha Shelach 5784. We learn this Parsha every year, and every year we find, at least in my experience, we find new insights and new interpretations that are worthy of our study and worthy of really being mitkabel, really accepting what we learn in order to then become better, more complete, and people, and more complete in our avoda to Hashem, which is sort of redundant because our being a complete person means serving Hashem to the best of your ability. So, in this week's parsha, Moshe sends out the spies, the Meraglim, and they go and they search out the land, they scout out the land, and they come back. 10 of the 12 that he sends out come back with a negative report. The Jewish people cry and are thusly punished. They are not then going to go into the land anymore. At this point now, they have to go. They're going to go into the land after everybody dies out. In other words, their children are going to go in, and that's going to happen 38 years later with the death of Moshe, and then Yehoshua is going to bring them into the land. Just so happens that's not the whole parsha. There's more to the parsha. After the sin of the spies, the Jewish people are given certain mitzvot, including nesachim, which are the wine is to be poured on all the sacrifices. There's the mitzvah of challah. There's the mitzvah of tzitzit. Last year we spent quite a bit of time discussing the laws of tzitzit and the tchelet and the chilazon and all that. It was an interesting discussion. If you want to look it up, that's on our YouTube page and for Parshat Shelach 5783. But in today's class, I think we're going to focus quite a bit on the sin of the spies and some of the famous ideas, and definitely ideas worth remembering. And like I said, being mitkabel, of accepting upon ourselves to improve our service of Hashem. So with no further ado, let's get right into the class with the sources. The source sheet was sent out earlier today. Hope you're able to get it. If you're not, let me know, and then we can fix that. Meanwhile, let's like I said, the parsha begins with the sending of the spies, and he sent out these people, and some of them have very interesting names, Nachbi ben Vovsi, etc. But aside from that, there's even a name change in the parsha, and we've discussed in previous years why this happened. And the famous Rashi. Okay, let's read the verse first, I guess, before we get to Rashi, right? So the verse, chapter 13, verse 16, that's Yud Gimel, Tet Zayin, says, Eli Shemot HaNashim Asher Shelach Moshe Latur Et Haaretz. Those were the names we just mentioned. The Torah mentioned all 12 names. Those are the names of the people that Moshe sent to Latur Et Haaretz, to tour the land, to scout out the land. Vikra Moshe Yehoshua bin Nun Yehoshua. And Hashem called Hoshea bin Nun Yehoshua. Now, we happen to know that he's been called Yehoshua before. We've had ample verses in the Torah, like last week's parsha, for instance, where we already had his name being Yehoshua. But here, it's significant that it's as if he changed his name at this point. And the Rashi's famous comment here, as I was alluding to before, was that he changed his name in order for Hashem to protect Yehoshua from accepting the advice, the eitzah, the opinion, the ideas of the 10 sinning spies, and that it seems to have worked to protect him. Interestingly enough, there was another good spy who did not get a name change. It's Kalev. Kalev was not given any name, was not given any special bracha or anything else. Yes, he was rewarded later, but in terms of before the event, there doesn't seem to be much mention of it. And amongst the many questions you could ask about this whole thing, it says if Moshe knew that they were going to give bad advice, there is an easy answer to all of this, by the way. The simple answer would be he didn't change his name at this point. As we said before, his name was Yehoshua for a while. So it could be he changed his name before to protect him from anything, from everything, from Amalek and from Korach later on, and from everything that could possibly happen. He changed his name from Moshe ben Nun to Yehoshua, knowing that he would be, seemingly he was already pretty keen on the idea of Yehoshua taking over for him afterwards. Whether he was keen on it or not, meaning that he liked the idea, I don't know, but he seemed to have it probably did not surprise him when Yehoshua was chosen as his successor. So he changed his name to Yehoshua previously, perhaps, and one of the things that it saved him from, amongst other things, was it saved him from the ridiculous ideas of these miraglim. Yeah, that's one simple answer to explain the Rashi. But the Meshech Chochmah has a much deeper answer, very important answer. In fact, I'm not quite done writing it up yet, and I have sort of a selection of my own thoughts on the parsha, and later on in the parsha, not in this week's parsha, but coming up very soon, we're going to have the big mistake of Moshe's sin with getting angry or hitting the rock instead of talking to the rock, etc. Whatever that mistake was. So I have I have a few ideas about one particular idea about what exactly Moshe's sin was. There's a way to combine many of the other Meforshim who've already written about this into one sort of idea, I think. I would humbly suggest, and part of that sort of hinges on this idea we're about to see from the Meshech Chochmah. So the Meshech Chochmah again is amongst other things, he's curious about why Kalev did not get a name change, but Yehoshua did. And he explains that really you have to understand what was going on at the time. This parsha is not a bubble in and of itself. It follows last week's parsha, Ba'alotcha, for a reason. What happened at the end of Ba'alotcha? The end of Ba'alotcha, Hashem told Moshe to select 70 people to be his deputies, so to speak, the Sanhedrin. And of those 70 people, 2 people did not show up, Eldad and Medad. They stayed and they prophesied in the camp instead of where they should have been. And Chazal tell us that what worried, eventually they come back in Yehoshua, the word comes back that what they said, and Yehoshua gets nervous and he wants to perhaps even kill them. And Moshe says, no, I'd rather everybody be a prophet. What is it that he said that was so bothersome to him? A lot of commentaries on that as well. But the famous idea is so it's mentioned in the Midrash and in the Gemara, is that Eldad and Medad were basically saying that Moshe would die and Yehoshua would take over and bring them into Eretz Yisrael. Pretty accurate prophecy, by the way. And that's, by the way, before the Jewish people were cursed with having to punished, consequenced, whatever you want to call it, with having to travel in the desert for 38 years. They thought it was going to take 3 days. And basically what Eldad and Medad said was that Moshe would die, perhaps within those 3 days, right? As far as they knew, as far as Yehoshua knew. And Yehoshua would lead the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael. So besides for the timing, everything else is correct. That is what happened. But Yehoshua wanted to kill them or get rid of them for this kind of prophecy, and Moshe defended them. But that's not where it ended. You see, other people knew about this. Remember, word got back to Moshe that Eldad and Medad said this. That means other people knew this prophecy. And what would that do to the people? Think about it. As far as the people knew, and this is what the Meshech Chochmah points out, as far as the people knew, most of these miracles happened through Moshe. It could be that Moshe had some sort of mystical, Kabbalistic, magical powers, and it's through his mastery of these powers, through his deep connection with Hashem, whatever, however you want to phrase it, he was able to garner these miracles that saved the Jewish people, which is somewhat true in a way, right? Because Moshe was how many of the plagues happened, and the splitting of the sea happened when Moshe raised his staff, and the man was in the merit of Moshe. There's what to say, and eventually, I mean, this is a sort of jumping the gun here, but eventually Aaron and Miriam die, so the clouds and the water disappear, and they return in the merit of Moshe. Again, a lot of things are happening in the merit of Moshe. Moshe
seems to have some sort of power. So this is what the people were afraid of. Because if... I'm sorry?
Sorry, were they thinking this would be like another golden calf incident?
Who?
Like the Jews would turn to like, oh no, Moshe's not here. We're gonna make another.
Right, exactly. So if Eldad and Medad were right that Moshe is going to die and Yehoshua is going to lead, so where's our miracles going to come from? So the Jewish people were understandably nervous, and they needed to be quieted down. And eventually, as it says in the verse 30 later on, it says, V'yihas Kalev et ha'am el Moshe. And this is what Meshech Chochmah is writing about, the fact that Kalev calmed the people down el Moshe, to Moshe. How do you calm somebody down to somebody? That doesn't make any sense. So the way Meshech Chochmah understands is the Kalev quieted the people about Moshe. That was what they were murmuring about. That's what they were worried about. We're not going to get into the land. We can't do it. We don't have the merits. We won't have Moshe's merits. How are we going to get into the land? And that's when Kalev quiets the people. And what does he say to them? That we are able to do it. Not that we're not relying on Moshe. It's not his yichus. It's not his power. It's not his magic that's doing all of this. It's not this idea. He says Gedulat Moshe, this greatness of Moshe, that's causing us to have these miracles and these merits. It's all of us. It wasn't just for Moshe that he received his powers and the communication of Hashem. It was not because of Moshe, not because he was some great guy and so Hashem decided to talk to him. It's because of us, we Jewish people. We have certain merits, and Moshe just happens to be our representative. So what does that have to do with why Yehoshua's name was changed? So says the Meshech Chochmah, B'zeh Amar Yehoshua, B'zot Teidun Ki Hashem Achai B'kirbechem. 1 second. So it wouldn't have worked if it wouldn't have been Kalev quieting the people. If it was Yehoshua quieting the people, what's he quieting them about? Remember, the prophecy was Moshe is going to die, Yehoshua is going to lead us. And Yehoshua is going to, and if Yehoshua got up and not Kalev and said, whoa, don't worry, we can do it. What's he going to be saying? It'll sound like he's saying, I've got the same power as Moshe, don't worry about it. But that's not true. Right? It's our merit. That has to come from us. One of us has to say that, not Yehoshua. In other words, our fear of Yehoshua being in charge of leading the land and not having any magical powers isn't going to be calmed down by Yehoshua. It has to be calmed down by somebody other. And who's that other? That's Kalev. And that, says the Meshech Chochmah, is why Yehoshua got the name change. Because he needed that protection. And he needed sort of that boost, and he needed to know that power might not come from him alone. It comes from the Jewish people together, but that needs to come from this is why he wasn't able to say this alone. He's really just building up his own kavod. No. It's Yehoshua. Hashem is protecting. It's not Hosea bin Nun, this powerful magician who's going to get you to Israel. You don't have to worry about that. That's his game that he's playing. This is all through Hashem, and Hashem will protect us and save us. That's the lesson according to the Meshech Chachma of why. And this explains, by the way, a lot of things in the parsha. Obviously, it explains why Kalev quieted the people. Why not Yehoshua? It also explains why Kalev was rewarded and not Yehoshua. Yehoshua was also rewarded, but the verse speaks quite a bit about Kalev getting this and Kalev getting that. And the Torah seems to be very quiet about Yehoshua's reward, although he gets rewarded as well, obviously. Of the 12 spies, he and Kalev are equally not killed, right? So that's already good, right? And as we'll see later on, Yehoshua is the one who takes the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael. So he inherits land. So it's all good for him, but it's important to know that his name change has to do with this idea that the Jewish people needed to know that Hashem is going to protect them and get them into Eretz Yisrael, and not some magic power. All right. Looking at the time now, I don't think we'll have a chance to get into this next piece. Maybe we'll save it for next year. Let's skip to chapter 14, verse 1. All right. So they said what they needed to say. The spies, they lied about Eretz Yisrael. They said it was impossible for us to get there. It's impossible for us to win against these giants. Now, they weren't lying about that per se. They actually did see all of that, but they didn't interpret it correctly, and they seem to have known that. Either way, the Jewish people themselves are. Give me one moment here. Sorry. All right. The Jewish people themselves are convinced by the 10 lying spies, and V'tisa kol ha'edah, and the whole community cried. V'itnu et kolam, they raised up their voices. V'yivku b'ha'am b'layla hahu, and the nation cried that night. Now, you know, and I know, the Jewish people rarely agree on anything. So it's strange that, and also, you could have like one person crying, two people crying, a million people crying, but for the entire nation to cry, how did that happen? So let's look at the Midrash, the Yalkut Shimoni. I couldn't find it inside the Midrash, but I found it in the Talalei Orot. That's our source here. And it says that Kevan Shabo mitoch haaretz, when the spies left the land, Amru Farzu Atzman B'chol Shifti Yisrael, they stood up and spread themselves out throughout the tribes. Kol echad ve'echad mitoch shifto, each one in his own tribe. Uminatfel toch kol zavit shel beito. And they started walking along like the floors of their houses and looking all concerned. Uvanav notav b'ayim alav v'ayu omrim lo malacha mari. And they basically their children came up to them and said, "Why are you so bitter? What's going on? You just came back from the Holy Land. Why are you so sad?" Ba'od hayu omed asa atzmo nofal lifnehem. And then they would like fall in front of them, like falling on the floor. And they said to them, "Oi li, oi, Oy, for me, Alechem b'ni v'notai uchlotai. So I'm so sad for myself, for my children. Why? Hayich hamorim atidim l'tata b'chem. What are the Amoraim going to do to you guys? Hayich hen atidim l'shlot b'chem, and how are they going to control you? Mi yochal lirot pnei echad mehem. Who's going to be able to protect you from them? Miyad hem kulam gavayim b'bechir. They all began to cry. B'nehem u'b'netehem u'cholotehem. Everybody in their houses, their sons, their daughters, everybody came crying. Ad shayu sheknot shomot et hadavar, until everybody heard each other crying. So in other words, other people, they're in tents, right? They're not. This is an intense point to consider. They're all in a tent, right? And thank you. And they're
Wait, you did
next
that on
to
purpose, right?
what?
You did that on purpose?
Yeah. And they're next to another tent. So other people heard them in the tent crying. And Shomot Davar, they heard what was going on. But they also began to cry. Mishpacha u'mishpacha mishmaot. So until everybody, all the families started crying. Kol hashevet bocha. Then the whole tribe was crying. V'chein taviru mebacha shifto. Then the whole tribe cried. V'chein kol echad ve'echad. Ashanasu shishim rubui chabura achat v'go v'natnu kol b'techem v'marom. Then everybody was crying. Minayin memarsh karinu be'inyan tisa kol ha'ida v'nu et kolam. So we got 600,000 men crying all as one group, and all of this went up to Shemayim, and that's what it means that everybody was crying. In other words, way before social media, these spies, they knew what they were doing, and they knew how to become influencers, right? They had this in their own tent became their YouTube channel, and they were crying and crying. Other people heard them crying and wanted to know what was going on, and it piqued their curiosity. What's going on? Why is he crying? Oh, is he crying because of this? And then they spread it around. And then it spread like wildfire. It became viral, literally. And that's how we got Tisha B'Av. Now it happens to be, right, that's the night of Tisha B'Av. I don't want to go into it too much, not for any thematic reason, but simply because we haven't even had Rosh Chodesh Tammuz yet, and Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, at least we start out Tammuz happily. It's only in the middle of Tammuz that the things slide down into sadness with the 3 weeks. So we're not there yet. I don't want to talk about it too much, but I would like to point out a very interesting Talmud Dekra. This is from Rav Chaim Kanievsky. So he on this verse, v'yitnu et kolam v'yivku ha'am alayla hazeh. He's a little bit confused, not confused, but he says you could learn something from the word et. Now, the word et, as we've seen before, is not translatable into English. It's the direct object, if you want to know grammatically what it is. And it's strange because sometimes the Torah uses it, sometimes the Torah doesn't use it, and there's always something you can learn from the word. So in this case, we're saying v'yitnu, the people gave et kolam, their voice. They're supposed to include something. What is it that it's including? So he writes, tevat et muteret maskinan shemichtav v'yisu kolam v'yivku v'kumash katav gabe Esav kol v'yivk. So he says that this is a reference to the fact that this is that this is how we cry. We lift up our voices. right? This is what happened with Esav. V'yesh lomar debal Rames, that's coming to hint Mashakatu b'Gemara Otalayla leal Tisha b'Av. Says in the Gemara that this was the night of Tisha b'Av. Haya. Amar Lem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Atem b'chitem b'chia shel chinam ani akavel lachem b'chia ledorot. Famous idea that Hashem said, you're crying for no reason. Oh, you want to cry? You want to cry? I'll give you a reason to cry. Tisha b'Av. And this is that's how it's usually interpreted. Of course, it's much deeper than that. The Jewish people on their holy level, to have lost faith that much in Hashem, they needed an object lesson that Hashem takes care of us throughout history, even through the darkest times, even through Tisha B'Av, even through the destruction of the temple, even into Galut, 2,000 years in Roman exile. Still Hashem is watching over us and protecting us. So he says, the Aleph Taf of Et is Rosh Tevot is the acronym for Tisha Av, the 9th of Av. Right? You have the Taf and the Aleph Taf for Tisha and the Aleph for Av. It's backwards, and it happens to be, he doesn't write this, but it happens to be, if you're bothered by the fact that it's backwards and Tisha B'Av isn't Et, right? That would be Ta, if anything. There happens to be Rabbeinu Bechaya writes that whenever an acronym in the Torah refers to something backwards, like in backwards order, not in Aleph Bet, but Bet Aleph order, right? Like we have here, it's something negative. So that fits because this is the Mamish Tisha B'Av. It can't get any more negative than that. Look what it says in the Zohar there in Parshat Vayishlach. Al Kain Lo Yachu Bnei Yisrael et Gid Hanashe et Rosh Torah Tevash Tisha Av, and Gid Hanashe is the et there is Rosh Teva Tisha Av, according to the Zohar. Mikan Shekol HaOchel B'Tisha B'Av Ki Ilu Ochel Gid Hanashe, and that's why we get the idea that somebody who eats on Tisha B'Av, it's as if they're eating the Gid Hanashe, the sciatic nerve. And there's a deeper connection here, of course. Also, we talk about how the reasons for Tisha B'Av is because of a failure of us to fight our Yetzer Hara properly. And the reason we don't eat the Gid Hanashe is because Yaakov and Esav fought, or not Esav, but Esav's angel, which is the Yetzer Hara. And there, Yaakov was not entirely successful in fighting Esav. He got hit in that area, and that's why we don't eat the Gid Hanashe. So it all comes back. It all connects. Baruch Hashem. All right, let's go a little bit further. So again, in Yehoshua's and Caleb's attempt to convince the Jewish people that the spies are wrong, you have nothing to worry about, they say, Ach b'Hashem al tamru v'atem al tirau et am haaretz kilach meinuhem. You don't rebel against Hashem. Don't have any concern about the people of the land, of these Amorites, Canaanim, these Amalek. Don't worry about any of them. Why? They are your lechem. They are your bread. You gotta eat them for breakfast, right? Sar tzilam alehem v'Hashem itanu al tiraum. They is sar tzilam alehem. They're the shadow of our food, right? They're nothing. We're going to take care of them, and their shade has left them, technically, and Hashem is with us. You don't have to be afraid. So what's this idea of their shade left them? We're not talking about, God forbid, we're not talking about shadim, demons or something like that. We're talking about literally in English, shade, right? It sounds like their tree left, right? They have no more tree.
It's a funny phrase, and that's why many of the commentaries deal with it. Luckily, the Ramban doesn't just quote his own opinion, which is also interesting, but we'll get to it. But he also quotes both Rashi and the Ibn Ezra. So we don't have to quote you Rashi and the Ibn Ezra. The Ramban is going to do that for us. And as you'll see, he agrees with all of them as well, which is unique. He gives his own opinion, which he likes better. But well, let's see what we can see from the Ramban, who usually argues with the Rashi and the Ibn Ezra. But sometimes he agrees with them. Here it's a beautiful case of shalom. Sar Tzilam Me'alehem, their shade has left them. Maginam v'chazkam, the Rashi is going to say, is their shield and their strength, their magen, right? Maginam v'chazkam, their chazaka, their strength. That is gone. How did they forget how to make these things? What's going on? So ksherim shebahem metu, their kosher ones died. In other words, the holiest of them died, and we say that might have been Eov, etc. Whoever it was, they don't have protection anymore. Davar acher, second opinion of Rashi. That's one opinion. So they don't have their righteous people. Tzilu shel makom sar melehem. Hashem's presence left them. So Hashem loves his children. Hashem loves all people, and Hashem is protecting them. But they lost they lost the right to be protected by Hashem. Hashem only protects people when they deserve it. They don't deserve it anymore, so Hashem left them. So those are the two major opinions of Rashi. So far, so good. Lashon Rashi. Rabbi Avraham Peirash. Rabbi Avraham. That's Rabbi Avraham. That's what he calls the Ibn Ezra. Rabbi Avraham Ibn Ezra. So he says, Ki tzilam magen v'tzina asher heim tzil al anil chamim. So their shade refers to a shield and a how do you say nilachmin? Tzina is like it's like a weapon, right? A certain weapon. Is it a buckler? Anyway, it's used as protection. It's not for fighting. It's kind of like a small like little shield you have in your hand, and it's kind of an armor. That's what it is. It's an armor. So their shield and their armor is gone. Which means that that they're afraid of us. This is what Yehoshua and Calev were saying. That they're not. They can't even hold on to their shield. They're so scared of us. They lost their shade, right? The protection. They lost it. Lo yikhu magen v'tzina v'kova v'leichales v'hilachem kenegdenu. And they're not going to even take anything to protect themselves from us. They're too afraid. They're too scared. V'yafa perish. And this is like I said, he agrees. He says it's a nice explanation. So again, we have now three opinions. Two of Rashi, one Ibn Ezra. One opinion of Rashi is that they lost the holiest of among them is no longer alive. Second opinion of Rashi is that Hashem is no longer protecting them. Third opinion is from the Ibn Ezra, and he says that their shield and their armor they're not going to even put on. They're too scared of us. Excuse me. And it says the Ramban aval yitaken sheyirmos hakatuv lema shenoda. But it's possible to say that the Torah is hinting to something that is already very obvious. It's known. Everybody knows this. And what's that? Ki belel hachotam lo yeh etzel rosh ha'ish asher yamud b'shana hahi. On the night of the Chotam, it's another word for another name for Hoshana Rabbah when Hashem seals our judgment. That there's this idea that somebody's head does not cast a shadow on that night. Whatever that means, and whether that's still true, let's not get into it. The Ramah and Shulchan Aruch makes it very clear. This is not a good practice for us to try to do. Some people want to know if they're going to be alive for the next year. So right after Judgment Day of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, last real day of Sukkot, on that night of Hoshana Rabbah, when you're supposed to stay up and learn anyway, for these Kabbalistic reasons, by the way. So leave it for later. So the Ramban is saying that if your head doesn't cast a shadow, that means you're a goner. God forbid. Lo aleinu, we shouldn't know such things. So again, this is
Groundhog Day came from?
No.
I don't know, just like the head with the shadow and
Yeah, that's a groundhog. Okay. But yes, there's all kinds of ideas of shadows, whether something casts a shadow. There's the idea. If I would I was predicting that you're gonna ask about vampires, right? The story about vampires is that they can't see the reflection in the mirror. This is a very similar idea. You won't see the shadow of your head. That means that means you won't survive for the year. That's the idea.
interesting.
Anyway, but again, we shouldn't try this. It's just only the moonlight. Don't try this at home. L'kach yomar kvar sar tzila me'alehem ki nigzar alehem mita, means they lost their shadow. Says the Ramban, means they lost their shadow. Literally, it's not. You don't have to go so far. As long as of course, assuming that you accept this idea that not seeing your shadow, the shadow of your head, on Hoshana Rabbah means that you're not going to live through the year. So that's what the Ramban is saying happened to these guys, to the Canaanites. They couldn't see their shadow. They're goners. They're not going to make it. So that's how Yehoshua and Calev tried to comfort them. V'Hashem itanu, and Hashem is with us. What does that mean? Kihu hashochen b'kirbenu. He is the one he lives with us. He's shochen. The Shechina is with us. And he's done miracles for us that anybody can see. This is not science. This is scientifically proven. The obvious miracles are happening to us. There's man coming from heaven. There's clouds surrounding us, protecting us, smoothing the track. Our clothes aren't getting old. Miracle after miracle is happening. So Hashem is with us. Al Kain Al Tiram. That's why you shouldn't be afraid. But wait, there's more. If you don't like that, comes along the Ramban, says, "Oh, Yermos." Or if you want, maybe it's hinting to Lasare Mala, to their angels that protect them. Now we've spoken in the past about this idea. The Ramban writes about pretty often. This idea that each nation in the world has an angel protecting him. Not just an angel, but even like a constellation, a planet, a star, whatever. Right? There's something protecting each and every one of the nations. So it could be that when it says that their shade is gone from them, it means she'ein uma nofelet ad sheyipol asar shalatchila. First of all, you need to know that a nation can't suffer, can't fall, can't be destroyed until its star is gone, its angel is gone. So when it no longer has sway, until it no longer has power, until you turn Pluto from a planet into an ice ball. Kidding, Pluto is was not seen by the Chachamim. That's when the nation can suffer. Dichtiv, as it says in a verse in Yeshayahu, Yivkur Hashem al tzva hamarom b'marom v'achar kach al malchi hadama al adama. Hashem deals with the heavens, and then it says Hashem deals with the earth. Right? So in other words, our earth, our nations are all affected by what's going on in the heavens. Meforish b'Sefer Daniel, and it's explained pretty clearly in the book of Daniel. Like, if anything can be clear in Daniel, it would be nice. But it says in Daniel, Yomar Kvar Sar HaKoach Asher B'Tzilo Yichiu HaGoyim, that the power that is of the Sar HaKoach, the strength, right, is of the nations, of especially over there, it's talking about Canaan, is gone. Hashem, Hamashbil Ota Mitanu, and Hashem, who is the one who controls them, Al Kain Al Tiraum. That's why we shouldn't be afraid. Hashem is with us. They're controlled by these stars and everything else, but Hashem controls that. So if Hashem is in charge of that, and Hashem says, don't worry about them, so don't worry about them. Hashem's got this. That's what it says in the Midrash of Shir Hashirim. V'nasu hatzlalim elu sarei umot v'amlachim alehem. The shadows flee is a reference to these angels and nations, because they're going to run away. Kihem hatzel al umot. They are this shade of these nations. And as I said before, he said this in multiple places. He says this several times in Vayikra 18:25, 11:16. He's going to say this again several times in Devarim. This idea is a common thread, a common theme in Ramban, that the nations of the world are what protect the nations. So the angels protect, and celestial spheres, they all protect the nations. And when they have no power, then that's when these nations can be taken care of by us. Okay. Baruch Hashem. All right, last piece for today. Going to go to Rav Hirsch for this one. So we've been saying all along that I started the class by saying we're going to focus on the spies, and we did. I think we did a pretty good job of that. There's obviously there's a lot more to learn in previous classes, and God willing, future classes will be able to cover more ground. But speaking of covering the ground, it's worth studying a little bit one of the last incidents in the parsha, and that is the man who was gathering wood on Shabbat. Get it? Covering ground, gathering wood. All right. Anyway, whatever it is, Bamidbar 15:32, Tetvav Lamed Bet. It says, "You b'nei Yisrael Bamidbar." The Jewish people were in the wilderness. We're in the Midbar. V'yimtzu ish. And they found a man in Mikoshesh Eitzim. He was gathering wood. That's what we're going to translate it for now. But Yom HaShabbat. He's gathering it on Shabbat. They didn't know exactly what his punishment should be. We find out eventually that it is indeed the death penalty. Rav Hirsch is bothered by one thing in particular, and that is that we know where the Jewish people are at this point. They're not vacationing in the Bahamas. Right? They're not in Timbuktu. Vayu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar is pretty obvious. Of course they're in the Midbar. Why do you have to tell us that? So let's see what Rav Hirsch has to say. We'll look at maybe the whole piece if possible. If not, then we'll focus on what we need. The preceding section dealt with the sin of Avodah Zarah, presenting it as the abandonment of God and His Torah. The focal point of the offerings mentioned there is the acknowledgement of that God directs our actions and guides our fate. And this comes to expression through Ola and Mincha v'Nesech. The whole idea of Neser, that's the wine libations. That's what that section ends with. The section's conclusion dealt with someone who performs avodah zarah deliberately, b'mezid, but without edim, without edim, without witnesses, and without warning. Hence, he is not brought before a human court, but is turned out to divine judgment, which imposes kared for avodah zarah and birkat Hashem, which is cursing Hashem's name. In other words, there are certain court cases that can't be court cases. There are certain things, because there were no witnesses, because we can't take him to court, but we know he did something wrong, that has to be taken care of by Hashem. There has to be justice. If there weren't justice in the world, it'd be very hard to believe in Hashem. But we need to know that there is a just God who knows exactly what he's doing, and how he does it isn't necessarily told to us, but that's a different story. Now, there's another mitzvah in which God has designated the performance of a specific act, or more accurately, refraining from a specific act, as an expression of our acknowledgement of God as master of our fate and of our actions. So what's that act? What do we have to do weekly to remember that God is in charge of everything? Accordingly, one who observes this mitzvah acknowledges, and one who fails to observe it denies, that God is the master of our fate and of our actions. For this reason, one who violates this mitzvah is subject to the penalty of kares and skila, like an ovid avodah zarah, and like a megadef, like someone who curses Hashem, and like somebody who does avodah zarah. This person, if he breaks this commandment without witnesses and everything else, he gets cut off from Hashem. What is this? This mitzvah is Shabbat. For the Sabbath puts a halt by God's command to our labors. And by this one shvita, by this one resting, we place all our actions, along with the world in which we live, before God's throne. Where our refraining from creative work on the Sabbath is a double acknowledgement, and the performance of any such work on the Sabbath is a double denial of God's mastery. In other words, we're saying, by not working on Shabbat, we're saying we realize that our work isn't us. We didn't make our money because of our work, because we stayed up late, because we got up early, because we made this many phone calls, because we hustled this much. That's not how we got our money. We got our money through Hashem. How are we going to prove that? By not making phone calls, by taking a break, by not doing our work, and money's still going to flow in. Thus, there is a close connection between the instance of a Chilul Shabbat, which is related in the verses that follow, and the laws of events mentioned in the preceding verses. Indeed, we see that the same Bnei Israel and the same Ada, the same nation, which we saw also at the beginning of the Parsha, only that there they rebelled against God and against this guidance, whereas here they resumed being faithful to God. Right here, the Jewish people are called again an Ada, a congregation. Witnesses, from the word aid. And over there they messed up. Here they come again. The Jewish people don't know what to do, and they want to do something right. They want to fix it. And although they were b'midbar, this is going to be answer the question why it has to mention that they're in the midbar. Although they were in b'midbar, doomed to wander through the wilderness without any hope of arriving to the destination. In other words, they're not going to get points now and get into Israel. Oh, we did this thing. Yay, we did this mitzvah, God. So let us go to Israel. We did what you wanted us to do. Okay, we're good now. That's not what's going to happen. They recognize and realize they're in the midbar to die. They're not going into the reward of Eretz Yisrael. They're not going to make it. And nevertheless, they do what they're supposed to do. They knew that they owed allegiance to God and to His Torah. And in the name of the Torah, they defended its commandments against all members of the Ada. There. It's not because of anything they're going to earn. It's not because of anything they're going to get.
some sort of reward for this. They want to do the right thing because now they realize that this is what it is. This is what life is about. You might not get what you thought you wanted at the end of the day, but you get your reward. The opening phrase of Vayu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar, the Jewish people were in the midbar, as well as the wording of this entire narrative, when compared with the narrative about the Mekalel, which is earlier in Vayikra, the man who cursed Hashem, indicate that here the special emphasis is laid on the initiative taken by the people. The people did this. They didn't have to, or they did have to, but they realized that they have to. And that's the amazing thing. It does not say here, "V'yetze ish v'yikoshesh eitzim, b'yom haShabbat v'yaviu oto el Moshe." Rather, it says, "V'yu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar v'yimtzu." It was they were in the midbar, and they found him. Thereby, our attention is directed to the activity of the people and to their intervention for the sake of the Torah more than to the sinner himself. It's not that we care so much, not that we don't care about him, but the focus is not the sinner here. The focus is on the people who found the sinner, wanted to do the right thing and fix whatever was going wrong, and that's the reward. That's the change. And you see, you look at the Torah and you have a parsha where the Jewish people mess up, Baalotcha, and then here we have in Shlach, they're going to mess up a little bit next week also, right? So there's going to be mistakes that the Jewish people make. You get to the point where you might ask the question, I thought Hashem had a plan here. How did Hashem have a plan and then it went wrong? It's not going wrong. The Jewish people are improving. The Jewish people aren't perfect. They're still not perfect. But the point isn't to be perfect. The point is to improve, to get better and better. And God willing, by how do we get better? We get better by following and learning the Torah. And hopefully this class, as I said in the beginning of the class, gives us some lessons to be mitkabel, to absorb and to understand, and helps us indeed improve our relationship with Hashem in the best possible way. I'm gonna stop the share to Facebook, and thank you for listening. If you have any questions, we can ask them after this or share them on YouTube later. Thank you.